tardes. It's good to meet you again here today. We previously met through our mutual friend Maya, a really talented singer and health coach. And I just thought I'd join Jesus today and kind of take the time to introduce him to you guys because he's a really talented video editor, and I think that he has a really interesting story to tell and things to talk about. So without further ado, Jesus, could you just introduce yourself to us?
Okay. Hi.
Yeah.
So my name is Jesus. Uh, my mom is not really too much religious. She's not Catholic, but she decides to to give me that name. I was born in Venezuela in the 1990s. Right now I'm 30 years old. My birthday is 11 August. Um,
So, talking about like growing up in Venezuela in the '90s and the early 2000s, um, what was that like? Like typical Latin American kind of.
well, it's curious because Venezuela, until the last 10 years, was one of the privileged countries in Latin America. Most of all because we have oil,
Yeah.
and that gives us an advance in in the region. And for example, I have the opportunity to be in a public university. So I receive in I have a bachelor in art. I have a bachelor in visual arts, and I didn't have to pay anything. So I just
That's
have to
wonderful.
commit with my with my studies. And even the university where I study was created by Chavez government. My family and I weren't in favor of Chavez politics, but this is funny because when I speak with Venezuelan persons, sometimes they think I'm uh, in favor
In favor?
of the government.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In favor of the government.
but that's not true. The thing is, you have to recognize the things that works, and there are a lot of things that didn't work, and create the path to what we are now. But um,
But you got a really good education.
yeah, but even good education, it is not because Chavez
Yeah,
government.
yeah.
It is like since the 15th, we have different presidents that they decide to invest in education in Venezuela, and they create for each I don't know for
City?
each city has their own university, so you don't have to move to the capital to study. So there are some careers that you have to move to Caracas,
Yeah.
but the broad careers you can study in the place where you born.
That's really nice. People can live with their families. They can. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
place where you can
In my
learn.
case, it was a decision because the career I wanted, it just exists in Caracas. But after I moved, before I moved to Caracas, I started a career in Valencia because that's the city where I born. Um, it was also in a public university, and it's curious. I was talking the other day with a Mexican friend, and we were talking about for example, here in Peru and Chile, the healthy service or the hospitals, the quality of the health service are poor, and you can just access to a good doctor if you have a lot of money.
Yeah.
On the contrary, in Venezuela, is similar to the German public education. If you want to be a physician, for example, if you want to be a doctor, even if you're rich or if you're poor, you have to go to the same university. There are some careers that you can only access in Venezuela in public university. To be a doctor, to be a physician, medicine that's a case. You can be rich, you can be poor, but you have to share the same lesson, the same classes, the same university, and the same teachers.
So
And that's cool because that kind of situation uh, you can see in other places in Venezuela, and that's allows people to mix and have possibilities to grow in the social scale. Because even if I born in a poor family, I have access to the same quality of education to people who can probably afford to even study in other countries. So that's my case. For example, my parents, they were middle class, and they always have enough to pay the debt,
Yeah.
but not to save money. So I grew up I with all the basic things, but I know that I will have to work too.
Yeah, yeah. You have to work to maintain the lifestyle.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And even start to work with my parents like when I have 20, no, 20, no, 12 years old.
Wow. So
Yeah,
you were working
because
from 12 years old. That's very different from America, where you can't work at 12 years old legally.
now in Venezuela too, but
Oh,
in that case it was because it was my
family business.
family business, and you can hack the the legal uh,
Yeah, yeah. And
regulations in
plus,
that
it's
case.
good for you too because I'm sure you learn things about business from a young age
Yeah,
that help you as an adult to.
yeah, and that happened because when Chavez win, the my father was has like a management position
Mhm.
in an international company, and when Chavez win, they left the
Country.
country and moved to Colombia. So he has to start again because my parents left the university when they conceived me,
Yeah, yeah.
because they need to produce more money, so they have to decide, okay, or we study or we work. We can do the two things at the same time. So he started to look for work in other companies, but because he doesn't have the degree, he
It's a disadvantage. It's harder to get a job.
yeah, because in the country no, in the company where he makes a career, that wasn't a problem because he succeeds with just experience. But in the other companies, he have to compete with person who have the same experience and also
Degree.
a degree. And what he made was to buy a car and start to be a taxi driver.
Yeah.
He
That's got to be a really hard change to go from
yes and
home.
no,
Yeah.
because for some reason my dad has como has an ability to improvise.
Yeah, yeah.
And he started like a taxi driver, but in 1 year, I guess, he started his own taxi companies. So he moved to be a taxi driver, to be the owner of a taxi company, because in that moment, that was in the
Early 2000s?
early 2000s, there weren't too much legal taxi cabs
Yeah.
companies in the country. There was just informal cabs that you pick up in the street, but there were no regulations. So his company was the second in our city to be the second company. Like it was like an official cab company.
Yeah.
So they after that he moved to run like a Italian restaurant. That's when I started to work with my family. That's when the business family started. In some moments they even have 3 restaurants. But it was funny because much people think that because we have 3 restaurants, we have more money. But
Yeah.
the truth is we have more debts. it,
Yeah.
it was funny because sometimes some of the um, employees asked me why I didn't have the last year cell phone, for example, because they have
Yeah.
the cell phone of the year, and I wasn't. No, man, from my parents.
They don't understand all of your money is going into the business.
Exactly.
It's not going into your personal effects. It has to be reinvested to keep things going. Buying oil, maintaining the cars, or in
Yep.
the restaurant. Buying ingredients, keeping the lights on. It's expensive to run a business. It really
Yeah,
is.
yeah, it is. It is. It is.
And that's really intense. But that's cool that you were able to learn those things from a young age. And so subject that we're going to discuss, what exactly prompted you and your girlfriend to move from Venezuela to another country?
Okay, we moved from Venezuela in 2017, and to be honest, sometimes I ask myself if if was a good decision, because at that moment, because I was already making money in US dollars,
Yeah, yeah.
that is an advantage if you live in Venezuela, because that's a way to avoid inflation,
Yeah.
and you can afford
You can
some.
buy groceries. You can
Yeah,
put oil in your vehicle.
I can even
Yeah.
can allow myself to invite my mom to a finest restaurant in Caracas, for example. And I don't know, maybe probably 2 years before, I was still in the university, in the college. So
Yeah, yeah. That's a big jump.
yeah, but I also was lucky. I have to recognize that I have some lucky in life, because I remember I was looking for a job.
Yeah.
I was almost finishing my studies, and I have a friend who work in I don't know how to say it, because it's very unusual. He works in a place who was rented by the two photographers and one videographer, and he told me, okay, come one of these days and let's see what happens. And the guy who he was working for didn't need anyone at that moment, but we go to the second floor and touch the door of the of the videographer and say, hey, you need some extra persons? And he say, okay, yes. And he interviewed me, and at the next weeks, and yeah, I start to work with him. You need to pause. Okay, so I went to the place where my friend was working, and his boss doesn't need anyone, but there was another guy in the same place who need an extra camera guy, and I was starting I in that moment I just have like I didn't have experience working with cameras and with video, but they gave me an opportunity. And the funny thing that when I was to my first day, we inter no see yeah my first day we interview uh, three big como presidents of
Yeah.
three companies in Venezuela, and my second day was in the house of the one of the wealthy family in the country.
Yeah, yeah.
So from the day to a night, I have like a real big change, because I start to make good money.
Yeah,
So
yeah. For Venezuela, yeah. Good
yeah,
point.
in Venezuela's levels, and I gain access to the biggest social classes in the country, and that was like an eye open for me, because I
You
start.
come from a middle class background. You're not used to.
But not just that. Remember that I was living in a country that was in a social, economical, political crisis.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I start to get access to a lot of people who live uh, in a very, very wealthy way. That live in mansions, that can spend $1 million in a party, and I'm not joking, it's true. And some of that persons was families who have been rich for generations, but also there were persons that were related to the government. They're wealthy. It was because corruption. So
Yeah, yeah.
that was very interesting, because it gives me a big picture on what was happening in my country in in a deeper way.
Yeah, yeah.
And in some way I take advantage of that, and because allows me to make more money. But even with that advantage, at some point I want to make even more money. So that's when I decided to migrate to be some kind of freelancer. The other day I was telling to you that I have a friend who has a friend who started to make money just doing homeworks for U.S. Children, for example, or oh, not just children. He's sometimes sometimes
People close to my age.
yeah, sometimes he makes homework for person that was in the college. He told us about Upwork and yeah, Upwork, because Upwork is the one that you can work with person from the Europe and the US. There are other platforms like Workana, but Workana is more for Latin American persons, and there are also people per hour. And I decided to give a try with Upwork. And at that moment, I have experience working. Yeah, at the moment I decided to try to be a freelancer in the web. I probably have in the moment have for like a 4 or 5 years of experience. So that was also an advantage because even when it was a new territory for me, I already have like a portfolio. So I have
So you can show people you have done.
I can
work.
show people that have experience, they have done work. I have also the luggage to work for almost 2 years with the British Council in Venezuela. The British Council is like the cultural. It's like a French alliance for the French, but the British have in Latin America something called it British Council. And British Council, I'm trying to remember.
Consulate.
British Council is the word.
Council, British
Yeah,
Council.
but they okay, so what helped me a lot when I decided to start to work in Upwork is I have a portfolio with some works I made for almost 2 years working with the British Council, and the British Council is like a UK institution that promote cultural events and projects in different countries. Venezuela was one of them, and I worked there in a project that was called Busca tu Espacio or Find Your Place, and they help people to get access to venues that are usually private or very expensive. And I was working in that project as videographer and photographer, and that allows me to have a good portfolio and have something to show when I start to apply to projects in Upwork. And that's when the funny story begins, because even in Venezuela, when you start to make money in US dollars or another currency, you have to find a way to receive the money because the government create a lot. Right now, that doesn't exist anymore, but at that time, you can, for example, you cannot have a bank account in dollars. So how do you receive your money? Okay, well, we discovered Pioneer, and Pioneer was a solution for some time, and even PayPal. But when the U.S. government started to make regulation over the Venezuelan government, sanctions exactly. For example, I it didn't happen to me, but I have friends who lost money in PayPal because you wake up one day and PayPal decide to ban your account because you are a Venezuelan citizen.
Yeah.
And you don't have a way to avoid that because the solution is, or they say the solution is, okay, you just have to create an account in the US and we will release your money to that account. But
You had no way to do
no,
that.
but first of all, I need a visa to go to the US. And if right now,